Hello, everybody. My name is Jared Kress. I'm the pastor of Calvary Hills Baptist Church, and I want to thank you for listening to the Calvary Hills Baptist Church podcast. We got a special treat today. I have a guest who is a longtime member of the church, longtime deacon of the church, Gene Ryder, who is here with me today. And I asked Gene to come in and give an account of what those first couple of years were like at Calvary Hills Baptist Church as they got started, as they went from 0 to 60 miles per hour in a short amount of time. I thought it would be a really cool thing to have him come and explain from his perspective what those first couple of years of history were like. So I have Gene here today. Brother Gene, if you would introduce yourself and then just give us a rundown of the history. And I'd like to come back and ask you a couple questions as you finish.
Okay, he's already given an introduction of me, but let me add to that is the fact I was a member of Rainbow Hills Baptist Church, which was the sponsoring church for Calvary Hills. So let me start there. Early in 1981, Gerald Griffin, the pastor of Rainbow Hills Baptist Church, recognized that families were moving into northwest San Antonio and no evangelical churches were in that area. Brother Griffin discussed this with the directors of the Brotherhood, the WMU, and the Sunday School. And together we developed a plan for Rainbow Hills Baptist Church to establish a mission or start a church in the area to meet the spiritual needs that were seen in that area, which is our location here. The plan resulted in the formation of Calvary Hills Baptist Mission, is what we called it at that time. Members of Rainbow Hills Baptist Church were asked if they would volunteer for 6 months and conduct Sunday school and worship service at the mission. The first Sunday school and worship service meeting took place on March 29th, 1981, when 38 people, some from Rainbow Hills, the volunteers, and residents from the surrounding communities, met in the home of Gene and Mary Ryder. Dennis Wall, the associate pastor of Rainbow Hills Baptist Church, preached that first message. But in order to meet the needs of the growing community, we couldn't continue to just meet in a home, so we contacted the Court Johnson people in that building, and they graciously granted us the right to come down there and have our church services in their building, which is located on Petranco Road. And that was April of 1981.
What was the area like at the time? You had mentioned that it was a growing area, but if you could sort of just paint a picture of what this part of San Antonio was even like at that time in 1981, what was it? What's a good description of the area?
Well, it's almost a rural area here at that particular time. Trees were all over the place. The buildings that you see along Petranco or anywhere there didn't exist. Petranco was a 2-lane dirt road. And SeaWorld was not here. It was mostly ranching area out here in this particular area. You could still see deer, wild turkey at that particular time when we moved out here.
Now, were there a lot of people that were living out in this area, or was it sort of just a place that had not really picked up with residential homes yet?
It had not picked up, but it was beginning to in 81, and that really was a good marking point because homes began to be developed. Oak Creek would become developed by U.S. Homes, and they come in and where I happen to live, by the way. Mm-hmm. And then West Creek over across 1604. I don't know who the builder was there, but they really began to put in the houses. Now, if you look at those, they're dense. And SeaWorld came and located right out here where it's located now.
So tell me a little bit about the motivation to start a new church, because I think most people have not been a part of a church that was scouting to start a new plant or a new mission or whatever you'd like to call it. But that's most people have never been a part of even thinking about, hey, we should start a new church. I think most people, when they think of churches, they already exist and they've just always been, but the idea of starting a new church is kind of new to most people to think about. So what was the motivation behind it and what was really, do you think you understood at Rainbow Hills what you were getting into at that time?
Yes, but let me back up a little bit to put a little bit of more answer to the yes. The church kind of knew what it was getting into, but many of us individuals didn't know what we were getting into. And Rainbow Hills was sponsored by Pruitt Avenue Baptist Church 7 or 8 years before that. And so they knew about being sponsored by a church and building, because what had happened there for Rainbow Hills was that Brother Thrasher, a retired pastor, not retired pastor, retired from civil service, who was a pastor, but he was liked being a church starter. And so he started a church in John Glenn Elementary School. Well, he started having Bible study. And it got big enough that he needed to have a building to go to. And so he came over to Pruitt Avenue Baptist Church, by the way, inner city church that was in a declining area, and made an appeal to that body of people. And they said, okay, we'll sponsor you. And sponsorship meant that they would hold the debt, but they also made a commitment to try to help you grow. And so he came over here in Rainbow Hills, and I won't get into all of that. It developed into a rapidly growing church, because the city was just continuing to move northwest with. Mm-hmm. So Rainbow Hills had some experience, and I would say this then, though. Gerald Griffin, the pastor, was the one that was sensitive to the Lord, just saying the city's moving, growing, and that's when I started off. He realized how this was developing out here, all of these housing developments. Marbach Road was a dirt road, and it soon became a big paved road before long. And so that's when Brother Griffin got this group together and said, I think there's no church out in that area, and I think we ought to be helping them to sponsor them and to get something going. And so that's when he talked to the director of Sunday School, WMU and Brotherhood primarily, and deacons. And I guess you use the word, cast the vision of us building coming out here and doing work. And he challenged those of us to come out to dedicate 6 months to coming out here, working and establishing a new church, teaching Bible study. Someone would be doing the preaching and all the things that need to go to visitation and all that type of thing. And he basically put it under the leadership of associate pastor that we had, which was Dennis Wall. And so I guess 20 or so of us signed up, maybe a little more, that we would come out here for a 6-month period. We'd teach Sunday school if we were Sunday school teachers, or whatever we needed to. They even tried to start the WMU and such stuff as that, even as a little mission. So we came out here, and you heard, we met in an individual's home, and that soon proved that it wasn't going to be large enough for that, so we needed more space. And we prayed about it, and we contacted Mr. Frank Court in the Court Johnson building, Pioneer Homes, and they have an office that's still up here on Petranco, a real estate office. And he said, okay, you can come out here and meet in our real estate office. And we went in there and we moved the furniture to the walls and such stuff as that, and set up folding chairs, and we made our sanctuary in his office building over there every Sunday. But we couldn't be there during the week, so we had Sunday morning services only at that particular time. And we, from time to time on Sunday evening then, we would go visit one of our sponsoring churches, those of us. Two or three reasons. It was good for us and it was good for the sponsoring churches to get to see some of us before we could talk to them about what was going on. So as we grew over here and the 6-month period of commitment occurred, true to form, we said that, well, those of you who felt that we needed to go back to Rainbow Hills because this mission was about to develop into a church. And so maybe half of the group or so, maybe more, went back to Rainbow Hills. They weren't deserting us. That was the commitment to begin with. And so they felt they had family over there or something of that nature is why they went back to Rainbow Hills. And some of us stayed, primarily those of us who had purchased land out here. Well, this is our church. A group of our members got together in a person's home. We didn't have a Wednesday night meetings at a building because we didn't have a building. Court Johnson building was available. But it was kind of a make or break time. Either we're going to make it or we're not going to make it. Some got discouraged. Most did not. But that was a prayer meeting that we had. It was serious enough that everybody got down on our knees in that living room of that member's home, and we prayed for God to give us guidance. We felt as though we should be here. We felt that He had led us here, and that we weren't here by mistake. The church needed to be here. And I didn't hear God speak to me, but I got up, and so did everybody else, knowing we had an answer. And we culminated that with each other concerning that. In a short time after that particular meeting, we were approached by a person from, I believe, Quest Development, who asked us if we would sell the 10 acres. And we said no. We did not think we should sell 10 acres that God had given to us, and specifically we felt called to put it out here. And he said, well, would you consider relocating? Well, we didn't turn it down. We said, possibly. And he said, let us work out an agreement here somewhere or the other. Now, let me back up and tell you what he told us was he wanted to incorporate the 10 acres we had with some acreage that he had down close to the corner of Petrenko. And so he came back with this proposal. And by the way, the land prices had just shot up big time in this area. So he came back with a proposal. Thank goodness he's a Christian man. He said, let's trade. You move about 100 yards north of where you are located right now. That was down there close to where Bill Miller's and Whataburger happen to be now. Mm-hmm. And he said, then we will swap you 5.5 acres here for 5.5 of our 10 acres, and we will purchase the other 3.5 acres from you of that 10 that we want, of your original 10. Mm-hmm. And he gave us a price that wound up the fact that we were able to pay the $90,000 landholding money debt back. We had $88,000 more that we put in a building fund. And keep in mind, we had these 4 sponsoring churches now who were encouraging us and helping us, and then gave financial assistance. So we made a deal with him, and we swapped, and we're where we are now with 6.5 acres debt-free. I mean, we swapped our 10 acres for 6.5 acres up here, but with no indebtedness on it, and $88,000 in the bank for a building fund, and sponsoring churches who were willing to help us as we called pastors and had other expenses to take place. We were on cloud 9, so to speak. We knew that God, though, was the author behind all of that. It truly was a miracle, and that brings us to where we are here today. as far as where we're locating. Well, obviously we were able to build a building, so we contacted the Baptist General Convention of Texas, and they provided blueprints and advice to us and helped us in designing this building down here. It's primarily pre-designed, auditorium, nursery space, a little kitchen for fellowships and such as that. That's what we call the Phase 1 building that's down at the very beginning there. So we got a contractor, and he built the building, and with the funds that we had received, we were able to pay for that building. And we moved into our auditorium education building on March the 31st, 1985. It contained about 7,000 square feet. We had 81 members with an average Sunday school attendance of 65. So the mission grew, and we took off once we got that building. One of the Sundays, I'll maybe chase a rabbit a minute for you. One of the first Sundays we had high attendance. Is what we advertised it. We want everybody to come out for this meeting, this in Sunday school and everything. It come a cloud-bursting rain. It was so bad that water ran in the doors down there where the preschool is on it. You know what? We had more people than we'd ever had in the history of the church.
That's great.
It was quite some highs there, getting new sponsors, getting to build a new building, record attendance, all of that kind of thing taking place. So we kind of forgot all of those struggles and hardships. They just became nothing to us after we saw what God could do. Mm-hmm. During the year of 1987, the ground was broken for the new education building. We grew. We had the auditorium, and we had some education sources in our first phase. But then we needed to have more space, education space. So the 2-story building that we have, we broke the ground on that. We got the financing for that in 1987 to build a building at the 2-story education building.
I want to go back to that prayer meeting that you referenced in 1983, and because it seems like that was the breaking point. It was going to break one way or the other. You guys were going to say, hey, things have been really difficult and slow. It's been a dogfight up till this point. Let's just call it and go back home and kind of shut it down, or God's going to give us the strength we need to go forward. And I know that the second is what happened, that he did strengthen you guys to continue on. But give me as much as you can about what was going on in your hearts and minds during that prayer meeting in 1983, and just sort of how you sensed that the Lord was moving amongst the young church at that time.
Well, there was really a lot of stress going on because we were frustrated. We had this $90,000 debt that we needed to do something on it. It was coming due for payments. We didn't, and we either needed to refinance just that alone, but we needed a building because we had been in the Court Johnson 4 years. They were gracious to let us do that, and as I mentioned a while ago, people would come and visit, but they didn't just join right off. They wanted to see what else really going to take place out here. And so there was a sense of almost, why don't we quit? If we're not allowed to build a building, just go back to some other church that's established and start over again, type of a thing. So that prayer meeting it really was a make or break prayer meeting. I wish I could say that every time I prayed, I had a feeling that I had whenever we prayed in that particular prayer meeting. The Holy Spirit truly was with us, guiding us and encouraging us. And as I mentioned, we knew God had an answer, and we knew that He intended for us to be there. We got up at that and shared that with each other. And everybody seemed to have exactly the same experience. So I think he's speaking to all of us at once, that small group of people that was there. And when we got up, we were satisfied. We were here. We were going to stay here.
So I think one last question that I want to give you, as you sort of think of the highs and the lows, you think of all the lessons that you learned in those first few years from sometime between 1980 and 1990, all the things that you went through and your group went through in starting this church. Main question is, what did God teach you most about himself, about yourself, in those early years of Calvary Hills Baptist? What was God's main lesson for you personally in your life?
Well, if, like the Bible said, if the Lord's for you, who can be against you, type of a thing. But a lot of times you don't feel that the Lord's with you until you face some difficulties and turn to him in desperation almost, and get that comfort of the Holy Spirit coming in with you. And then the joys of seeing God do things that you could not do until you ask him, and he blessed you by way above beyond what we would even dream, or we'd been happy with half of whatever we got, I guess I should say.
Well, thank you, Brother Gene. I appreciate you being here and giving us this just little look at the history of what those first few years were like at Calvary Hills Baptist Church. But thank you so much for being here and joining our podcast at Calvary Hills Baptist Church. If you guys enjoyed this, please share it with a friend. Like, subscribe, share, leave a positive review, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.